You want to come sailing Etchells next week?
Sounds good. Where are we going?
Annapolis, Maryland.
Okay.
Annapolis Yacht Club has got a challenge here against this great club in San Francisco Yacht Club. And I think maybe you could help Annapolis out a little bit going up and against this club. What do you think?
Put me in a slightly difficult situation here.
All righty. Well, Ben, it's an honor to be on this stage. And I was with your skipper last week in Annapolis, Jimmy Spithill, and I opened up asking him if he preferred California or Australian wines. And he said Australian, which was kind of interesting. J.P. Morgan. So J.P. Morgan had a lot to do with the America's Cup, and he went to the British Isles to find a skipper, a guy named Charlie Barr, who won 3 times. And he was quite an interesting guy, J.P. Morgan. He had this young man come to him and say, hey, I can make motion pictures. And J.P. said, well, why don't you come to the America's Cup and do some motion pictures, and we'll see if that works. Anyway, J.P. was so impressed with the young man that he invested in the company, and it did pretty well. The young man's name was Thomas Edison, and the company was General Electric. So anyway, well, let me just go. So we all watched very carefully there, and it's no secret that Oracle Team USA was a little bit behind the 8 ball there, digging deeper and deeper, and there was a change, and you were the change coming on board.
because they made the change. He'd already left for home, and I called him up. I said, "Look, John, I'm sorry about this, and it's difficult, and all the rest of it." He said, "Look, it's fine. I want the team to do well. I'll come in tomorrow morning, and we'll go through all the software. We had all the starting software and navigational software, which I hadn't even seen up until that point because I'd been steering the other boat. And so to have that kind of support, I think that's just a measure of the sort of team it was, that someone like John, despite the ultimate disappointment of not being on the boat racing anymore, he still wanted to help the team, and that's a lot of credit to him."
Well, I would say that John Kostecki's reputation is intact. He's won around the world race. He's got an Olympic medal, and he's won the America's Cup, which makes me think that you've won the America's Cup. You've got multiple medals, but you haven't won around the world race.
Yeah, I don't think many of us have. Not many of that. Many of us.
Well,
Are that
is it on your bucket list here to go around the world?
Not really, no.
So the Finn's tough and the America's Cup's tough, but at the end of the day, you get a shower.
Yeah, no. My dad actually competed in the first ever whitbread race. It was back then in '73, I think. So yeah, sailing's definitely been something in my family. But I would just like to say, the reason why we're all here tonight is obviously, I think everyone in the world knows someone, a friend, family member who's had been involved with cancer or suffered from cancer, and it's obviously a very difficult disease to go through. And my father actually suffers from prostate cancer, and so I know firsthand what a lot of people here have gone through. It's a very difficult thing to have to deal with, and so I just think it's an amazing thing that you're all here tonight and raising these funds, and keep at it. It makes a huge difference.
Thank you. Very kind to say. Does the name Carl Van Dyne ring a bell?
Yep.
Okay, so Carl Van Dyne was a senior at Princeton and won the Gold Cup, was Olympian in Tokyo in 1968. And sadly, Carl, at the age of 34, after getting his PhD at Stanford, Princeton undergrad Stanford, passed away at non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And one of the interesting things about Carl is in the Olympic Games in '68, he was winning a race, and he hit the windward mark. Nobody saw him hit the windward mark, but his conscience was his guide, and he reported it and got disqualified and did not win a medal that year. But the rules were changed that you could re-round the mark after that time. So he had a lasting impression. But anyway, Carl Van Dyne was an inspiration to me. He grew up on the Jersey Shore like me, and I just wondered if you had known him, about him.
Yeah, that's a very famous story about the situation in the Olympics and hitting the mark. And yeah, it's great. I mean, that's one of the great things about sailing. There's a lot of sportsmanship involved. Some great stories over the years of some great sailors who've done some amazing things, and I think that's why we all love the sport.
So I got to spend a day on USA 17 with Jimmy Spithill and the team, and I have to tell you, Ben, this was the first time in my entire sailing career I did not volunteer when I got on the boat to steer.
I'm amazed you got on the boat, to be honest.
Well, I did get on the boat, and at one point, John Kostecki, I was between Slingsby and Kostecki back there, and about a third of the way through, Kostecki whispers to me, "Jimmy Spithill is fearless." Well, spinning, the fastest I saw that day was 41.2 knots up in the foils, and that's pretty exciting coming in a leeward mark. But now you raced against Spithill, so you got to know how he is to race against. And then, of course, you had this unbelievable turnaround. Is Jimmy Spithill fearless?
I'd say so. I think we all saw what he was like in the press conference, right? I mean, you guys all had a good crack at him. You certainly gave him a hard time. And he came through that pretty much unscathed. Yeah, he's one of these guys. He's a machine. He's emotionless, for want of a better word.
I described him one day. I think the score was something like 7-0. You got up to 0. That was interesting in itself.
We got ourselves out of minus figures.
Yeah, I was just so glad the record books would never have an asterisk there. So you're kind of down, and I'm watching Spithill come down the walkway there on the promenade, and he just looked like Popeye having just eaten a can of spinach, coming to the press conference, and I was sitting there thinking, for those of you who've been around a little while, that either this guy is going to be the next Joe Namath who guaranteed victory in the Super Bowl and delivered, or he's going to look like Y.A. Tittle on his knees in the end zone with blood coming down his face. There's no halfway there. And when he said, we can win races, I'll keep telling you guys, we can win races. And you'll see. And we got some big changes. You know, and I'm looking over at Dean Barker, not at Spittle, and Barker's kind of twitching a little bit there. So my question to you, Sir Ben, what kind of psychology was going on there at those press conferences?
Yeah, but, well, unless there were some big changes that I didn't know about, I think he was pulling everyone's leg. But he certainly did a good job of it. It was impressive because you're right. I think he certainly get the Kiwis guessing about what was going on, and you hear all the stories about flying in boat builders from around the world and all the rest of it, which was complete nonsense. So I think it worked. Maybe it worked. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought it was brilliant. Like I said, he was, and I was with him last week. He said he thought my comments were okay. He thought they were fair.
It was just being nice.
It's
not what he said to me.
Yeah, it was a tactician I was picking on more, though. The pressure is on here. Well, the pressure was on, and being down 8-1 was pretty daunting. But you started to go fast, and you were making good calls. And what was in your mind day after day? I mean, it stretched on for a week, just trying to get one more race, and one little thing, and the gods were with you a little bit. I mean, here New Zealand's ahead. They're 2 minutes from the finish line, and the time limit runs out. They're in the lead, and the wind goes over the limit. So did you feel like you had some destiny, or what was the attitude on the boat when you were down to just chip away at that lead?
No, you're right. The race that the Kiwis failed to reach the time limit that was obviously very tough for them. But I guess in the end, it was potentially a little bit of karma. As we talked about earlier, we went into the event on -2 points for something which involved a different class of boat. Although it was involved with the America's Cup, it was something which was, basically a complete balls up. And it was just a lack of communication and a real honest mistake. And we obviously got punished very hard for that. And it was right that the team was, an example was made of the team, because that's not right, that something should be wrong with the measurement of the boats. But at the same time, it was a very harsh penalty. And so maybe that was, things just being evened out a little bit. But certainly I certainly felt for the Kiwis. I sailed with Team New Zealand for the 2007 America's Cup. I know the guys really well. Dean and Ray and the rest of the guys, they're all brilliant guys, great sailors, and that was a really tough situation for them to go through.
Well, the fact that you do know Dean Barker and Ray Davies and sailed with them on their team, was that a help to you when you were out having a match against them?
I think so, in some ways. I think the hardest part for those guys was the fact that they had an entire nation was waiting in the wings for them to bring the America's Cup home, and the fact that they were 8-1 up, and I don't know if it's true or not, there's stories of having, jets waiting on the tarmac and parties being ordered and all the rest of it. I mean, that level of expectation, I've experienced that myself, and I can tell you it's not much fun to be dealing with that. And the more and more that our team got better and faster, I mean, that must have been very, very tough to deal with.
Well, they're jibing better, they're tacking better, they're going faster upwind, it's about even downwind. So it must have been quite a mind bender when you started being even and then maybe a little faster and tacking better than that. You were on the boat when they almost capsized. What were you thinking at that moment? You might recall it was race 8, where on the third leg, New Zealand came to tack to leeward and ahead. I'm not sure that was the right move, but that's what they did. And they got to 43.8 degrees and almost capsized. I was 6 lengths away, holding my breath. Oh, no, please don't let the America's Cup end this way. But anyway, what were you thinking at that time?
No, I think you're right. That was a real game changer. I mean, for most of us on the boat, that was the first race where we actually started being competitive upwind. We actually caught them up on that upwind leg. And for whatever reason, they had a bad tack, whether it's because they were rushed or they had an issue mechanically with the hydraulic system to invert the wing or change the the camber of the wing from tack to tack, and that's really what put them in that difficult position. But certainly for us, that situation there gave us a belief that we had a race on our hands. We could match them upwind, and if we sailed well, then we could beat them, and that, for our whole team, that was a massive boost.
Ben, I'm sure you appreciate that you've done some amazing things in the sport of sailing, and I'd like to encourage you to write your memoirs soon, while it's all fresh in your head, about how you won these medals, what was going on, what it was like to sail in the America's Cup, so it becomes a very important part of history. So I hope you'll take that challenge. What do you think?
Cheers.
So if you were to write a book, what were some of the things that you would write down on a piece of paper that would be special, that you would like people to know? And think about the young people that would read it, or the people 50 years from now. Give me an example of what would be in your head.
Well, first, I think it's very dangerous once you're still competing to be writing memoirs. But I think clearly this America's Cup has been the most amazing sailing race we've seen in many years, if not ever. I mean, the boats, the action, the comeback, everything that, I mean, you couldn't write a better script. So I hope that we see some great documentaries, some great written documentaries as well of this period. And certainly the other thing for me, which has been amazing, has been the Olympics, and having an Olympic Games at home in London 2012 as an Olympian to compete on home waters. There's nothing prouder than that moment, I can tell you. It was incredible. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to be in some great positions, but I think certainly this last period to do something with a team, with a group of guys, to come through such a difficult situation, that was very special. And I'm sure it'll be written about for many years to come.
Well, you might not publish your memoirs right away, but I would encourage you to get it down on paper, work with somebody, put it in the drawer there for 10 or 20 years, but at least you'll have your thinking at this time. I think it would be really good. All right, so the Olympic Games. Like I said, I was there in London, in Weymouth, and you were in the news like crazy. You're one of the superstars of Great Britain, not only around the world. How did you react to that pressure during the games, particularly being in the deep hole and working your way, coming to that last? What's going on in your mind?
Well, I guess I didn't deal with it very well at the beginning, because the first 6 races I was beaten by the Danish sailor who sailed incredibly well, and I was really up against it again. Unfortunately, that seems to be a theme of my sailing, which is I probably need to go and speak to a sports psychologist and work that bit out. But yeah, it was a tough situation. Of course it was. Like you said, there was a huge amount of expectation on all of the home athletes to perform. And there was a lot of effort, a lot of funding over many, many years had gone into this home Olympics and making it a special event. So it was tough. I think the hardest thing as a competitor was the fact that in past Olympics, when you go away and you compete, say in China or Greece, you're away from home, you're away from all the distractions, you just focus on your event, your training, and you get on with it. When you're at home, all of a sudden, you have to deal with the expectations of sponsors, of friends, family friends. I mean, there were people I'd never met before who claimed that they were related to me in some way or other. And that's hard, and you feel obligated to make an effort, and it really is difficult to deal with, dealing with all of those expectations on your time, as well as training and preparing for an event. So for all of the home athletes, I think that was very difficult.
Well, I think one of the greatest things that all of us respect in sports when you overcome adversity or make a comeback. And you might not know this, but I was on the water in 1996 at the Olympic Games in Savannah, and I was on the water in Sydney. Now, what happened in Savannah, I think you were 19 years old, and this brilliant sailor from Brazil, Robert Scheidt, and he had to beat you in the final race, and you had the match race of all time, and he got the gold, and you got the silver. And then 4 years later, here you are, the two of you at the top of the fleet in the lasers, and you had almost the exact same scenario at the windward mark and luffing each other, but you came out on top. And you've been able to do that. And let me assure you, there were a lot of Finn sailors, including the Danish guy, trying very hard to keep you from winning that medal, but you pulled through. Very impressive. So if I can interrupt this program for 1 second, I want to give you a quick story of something that happened to me in the last 36 hours. And you might recall last year, my dear friend Ted Turner was sitting here in this seat. And it took a little while to get Ted warmed up, by the way. But he got going pretty good.
What are you saying? I've got to start yet?
No, you're doing pretty well. I'm just wondering if you're going to pull out a piece of paper with the 11 voluntary human initiatives to replace the 10 commandments. But anyway, so here's my quick story. So I had long set up to spend 4 days with Ted at one of his ranches in Montana to get some horseback riding and fly fishing. And Ted, by the way, since you've seen him a year ago, has had some health issues, but happily, he's on the mend. Well, we got word while we were out there that one of our friends, one of the crew of Courageous that won the cup, a pitman, Stretch Rider, was very close to passing away with a horrible cancer. And Ted says 2 days ago, let's go see him. So yesterday morning, we left Dillon, Montana, flew to Long Island, New York, had a 45-minute visit with our friend. He was quite surprised when Ted Turner and me walked in to see him in that hospital room. And then last night, he said, well, I'm going to South Dakota, so I rode with him on a plane to South Dakota, and then this morning he says, oh, by the way, you got to get to San Francisco. So I got to ride on his nice little jet to get here today. But it tells you a little bit about Ted Turner, that he would take the effort to go see one of his shipmates in his time of peril. So I just thought I'd pass that. All right, I've been warming up here, Ben. There's a question that's just been gnawing at me for about a month now. Who are you going to sail for in the next America's Cup?
So that's an easy question. I thought you were going to ask me something difficult, but well, you know, there's a lot going on at the moment, Gary. As you know, the America's Cup. It's an interesting period, and of course, we need to find out what happens with the next event with what Russell Coates Larry Ellison with Russell Coates, hopefully. What they decide they want to do with the America's Cup. I think we all hope it will be back here in San Francisco.
I think it should be, and it will be.
Yeah,
is my view.
I mean, what an awesome venue and great hosts and all the rest of it. Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that we would like to have a British team involved with the Cup. But having said that, it's as we all know, it's a big boys' game. You can't go into it without the right level of funds. You know this. You've won the America's Cup, and you've got to have the team with the wherewithal to win. Otherwise, there's no point. You're wasting everyone's time. So, and within the next couple of weeks, we've really got to decide if we can get that together. So things are moving quickly, and hopefully that can be the case.
Well, I know how important you are to your country, England, and what that means. And England really has unbelievable sailors and Olympians and Shirley Roberts. I mean, the list goes on and on. Ben, I think that you should sail for Great Britain and come challenge here. I think you should.
We'll try.
Of course, we'd be enemies, but anyway, I think it would be exciting. And the British have had such a long, unsuccessful history in the America's Cup that you could be the guy to turn this around.
Well, that's right. We started the event in 1851. Back then it was called the 100 Guineas Cup. And you Americans came over in your little tin pot boat, called America, won the cup, sailed off, called the Cup America. And we haven't seen it since, so it's probably about time we change that.
You know, Ben, I'm kind of wondering how people of the past would consider catamarans being used in the America's Cup, which, let's face it, was a little bit controversial, although, boy, was it exciting. Thank you for providing such wonderful TV. But here's a little story. So there's a 20-year-old guy in 1820 named John Cox Stevens. And John Cox Stevens built himself a catamaran. The name of the boat was Double Trouble, 2 holes, Double Trouble. Anyway, he was a catamaran aficionado, 1820, and 24 years later, at the age of 44, he founded the New York Yacht Club, and he was the head of the syndicate that built that boat, America, to go to England. So I have a gut feeling that he is up there looking down, endorsing the use of multi-hulls in the America's Cup. I also did an interview with a guy named Thomas David Blackhauler Jr., one of the greatest San Francisco sailors of all time. And Tom told me, I asked him in this interview on ESPN, Tom, if you were the czar of the America's Cup, what it would look like? And he said, if I were czar of the America's Cup, it'd be in San Francisco Bay and catamarans. And what an unbelievable show we had in San Francisco Bay and catamarans.
Yeah, it's a good bit of foresight there.
Is it scary coming into the leeward mark at 45 knots?
Yeah, it's a little bit dodgy at times, yeah. But funny thing was, obviously we had a lot of help. We had a lot of software, and I had a tablet in the life jacket, which I had a tablet PC to help with the navigation. And as we all know, everyone around the world got into the sailing. I mean, I was getting messages from friends at home going, "Oh, I can understand what sailing's about. This is amazing." And also I was getting messages from friends and family at home saying, "This is ridiculous because we're trying to get our kids to sleep, and the racing's on at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and the kids won't go to bed." And I had a message from my nephew, who's 8 years old, and he said, "Uncle Ben, this is great. The racing's really amazing. It's fantastic, but I don't understand it why you keep opening your life jacket and you're looking for sweets, and there clearly aren't any sweets there." I said, "It's okay, Oscar, not sweets." "Oh, okay, good.
You know, I happen to have learned that both Jimmy Spithill and John Kostecki early on during practice both fell overboard. Did you ever fall overboard?
I very nearly fell overboard, yeah, in training when I was steering the boat. And they're just, the forces on the boat are amazing. And if you are jibing, certainly jibing and turning up downwind around the leeward mark, the forces are just unbelievable. And if we had designers who went out on the boat and they hadn't been out on the boat much before, and if they're in the wrong spot when you turn up and they're not holding on to anything, they literally just go flying off the boat. So we lost quite a lot of people off the boat, and we lost Joey Newton in between races. He went for a bit of a tumble. So it's easily done. I ended up with, I had my, coming out of the jibe, Darren Bundock, who was steering our boat out of the jibes, I ended up with my arm around his neck. That was basically the only thing holding me on the boat. So poor old Darren, he was trying to steer the boat out of the jibe, and he had me basically trying to throttle him, staying on the boat. So we had some pretty scary moments. But I can say, they were scary because we obviously know what happened to the Artemis team and Andrew Simpson, who was one of my best mates in the world. And so it was, it was tempered. It was a lot of fun. The boats are amazing. They're really aggressive, full-on boats. But at the same time, we had to respect what we were doing out there and trying to be safe. And I think, obviously, everyone was devastated with what happened to Andrew. But I think the sailing community, I can't, being a sailor, I was just blown away by the level of support from everyone in the sailing world and the community. Everyone that came together, the fundraiser that we had in San Francisco, and all of the people here tonight who made such huge efforts to help us with that. It's been one of the most touching moments of my life, and I think one of probably, the racing the America's Cup was great, but I think the way the America's Cup community and the sailing world dealt with that incident really was fantastic.
Very nice. Well said. So, your leader, Mr. Ellison, was kind of a recluse throughout the America's Cup summer. We didn't see much of him, although he did come alongside our regardless, where my thing, and I talked to him for 10 minutes, and I had really good material at that end of 10 minutes, and within 30 seconds, his longtime assistant, Judy Sims, sends me a text message. "You may not use any of the contact or discussions of Larry Ellison in your TV broadcast." However, when Larry Ellison showed up at the press conference after winning, He was gracious. He was funny. He was respectful. He was fun. And I was thinking, where was he all this time? We should have gotten to know him. So tell us a little bit about Larry Ellison from your perspective now that you've gotten to know him.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, the times that I've met Larry Ellison, he's been exactly how you described him. He's very charming, very approachable, very knowledgeable about sailing. I just think he's clearly a very busy man. You know, we saw him at the team maybe 3 or 4 times during the whole 12 months that I was with the team. You know, he was very rarely around. I know that he kept in regular contact with Russell Coutts. He was clearly up to date with what was going on with the team, and certainly during the event, he was out there every day watching the team, supporting the team. He was on the phone to Russell a lot during the races, giving advice. Poor old Russell, he sort of phones. Yes, Larry, yeah. But, you know, he's on it. He knows what's going on. And certainly as we got to the end of the event, and it went on much further than any of us thought it would do, he gave up his whole business week. They had the Oracle Open World, which is must be one of the biggest weeks in Larry's year, work-wise, and he gave that all up to support the team. So it was fantastic. And certainly this whole vision of what we've seen with the America's Cup, yes, there's been a lot of criticism. Yes, none of us really knew where this would end up, and we were fortunate the event ended up being the success that it was. But we shouldn't forget that it was really, you know, Larry Ellison, Russell Coutts' vision to make it happen, and certainly the. And I don't need to. I'm almost out of contract with Oracle, so I don't need to brown those anymore. That's honestly my viewpoint.
Are they going to renew it?
So I think, you know, that's a huge credit to those guys and the effort that went into the TV. I think the TV production in particular was stunning, and that made a huge difference.
Thank you. So do you know...
And the commentary. Sorry, Guy.
That's okay. When you're a commentator on TV, you can't imagine the number of emails that come, and some people tell you you're great, and other people you tell you're terrible, and it becomes a blur, and try and do the best you can when you're out there, and it was great fun. Now, do you know what you have in common with John Kostecki, Paul Kayard, Russell Coutts, my partner Kenny Reed, who did a nice job in his first television exposure? Do you know what you all have in common? You've all been gracious speakers at Leukemia Cups. Russell spoke here a few years ago, did a great job. He did one for us in St. Louis a few years back, and he's done one in Newport, Rhode Island. So very appreciative, and Ben, to have you on our stage and supporting the Leukemia Cup, and you can see how passionate people are. And you might not know this, but I got involved 21 years ago. Volunteer, didn't know much about blood cancer, didn't know the difference between lymphoma and leukemia, and quite ironic that I ended up with one of these diseases. And unlike Carl Van Dyne, who passed away from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, all the treatments and all this research, I became the recipient. So you never know how things are going to go in life. But sometimes when you help other people out, in the end, you're the one that's helped out the most. And that's one of the things that I learned. Hey, by the way, you know who's here tonight? Lucy Jewett, newest member of the America's Cup Hall of Fame. Stand up, Lucy. Oh, you're welcome. Nice to see you. And welcome aboard. You're coming soon, I'm sure. Well, look, Ben, let me just close by saying it's a real honor to have you here. I'm a great admirer. I first got to meet you. I think the youth worlds were in Bermuda, and somebody said, you ought to watch this kid, Ben Ainslie, and there was a young girl there, Shirley Robertson. She went on to get a couple gold medals, too, and boy, was that guy right, whoever it was that said to... And so to be there with all your Olympics, which I've covered, and watch you do this, and now this America's Cup in a very calm manner, you're an inspiration. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone. Thanks very much.